this video, I'm going to talk about genre and format. One important way to categorize books is to separate them by genre. Genre is the pattern of content, like character types, plot structures, settings, and so forth. Fantasy and historical fiction are both examples of genres. We could also categorize books by format. Format refers to the physical qualities of a book, like its shape or its use of illustrations. Picture books and middle grade novels are examples of formats. Some formats are meant specifically for children and align with different phases of literacy. I want to be clear about the differences between genre and format. People often use the term genre very freely, and you'll probably hear people say things like the genre of picture books, and we know what they mean. But I think it's helpful to distinguish genre and format as different types of categories. Format is like a box, and genre is what you find inside it. Format often means concrete things like the size of a book, but also abstract ideas like the complexity of a book's words. Yet you can tell the format without reading a book, often just by looking at the outside or flipping through the pages quickly. Genre refers to the content. Genre is more abstract. To know the genre, you have to read the story and look for clues as you go. Sometimes books will give you more clues on the outside too, in the title and the cover, but often you have to peek inside. A dragon. I think this is a fantasy box. Let's try this out with a book example. I have this book here, and I can tell from the outside that the format is a middle grade novel. It's really thick. And if I look at the pages, the font is a normal size. So I'm pretty sure this is a middle grade novel, even without having read it. However, if I wanted to know the genre of this book, I'd have to read it to be sure. I can guess that it's going to be fantasy because there's a dragon on the cover, but it could just be a metaphorical dragon, so I'd have to read it and see if it's a realistic story about a kid who loves dragons or if it's actually a dragon story. I can do the same thing with this picture book. This picture book, I can tell that it's a picture book from the beginning because it's big, thin, and if I open it, big pictures all across the page and not much text, and the text is fairly big. So that all tells me that this is a picture book. Again, there's a dragon on the cover, so I'm going to guess that the genre is fantasy, but I would have to read it to really be sure. Every book has both a format and a genre, and each tells you something different about the book and who might like to read it. So you can have a fantasy picture book and a fantasy middle grade novel. They're both fantasy, and I expect to find some unrealistic story elements in both of them. Even though they're both fantasy books, I would probably recommend these books to very different readers at very different ages because of that difference in formats. Different formats mean different ages, and different genres mean different comprehension styles. So if you're reading a book and you know it's realistic fiction, then if a character runs into the scene shouting about seeing a dragon outside, you're going to think, the author wants me to think that this person is making stuff up for attention, or they misunderstood what they saw, or something like that, because you know that the story is realistic, so you know how to interpret that scene. But if you're reading a fantasy novel, you'd understand that sentence in a very different way, because there might actually be a dragon outside. And so because you know the genre that you're reading, you actually understand things differently in a story. And that's another reason why knowing a genre is important when you're teaching reading, or when you're recommending reading, and when you're reading yourself. So knowing both the genre and the format of a book is very helpful for knowing how to evaluate the book, and knowing what kind of reader is a good match for that book.